a little piece of information in there that I always like to read. It helps me. We ready? Okay. And it says, "For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone better understand the alcoholic." It says, "Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person." And certainly when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had no idea that I was a very sick person, because what I felt like was I was a no-good, rotten SOB. That's the way I felt deep down in my heart. And when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I used to stand in the back of the rooms and I looked down at my feet all the time, because I had become very ashamed of what I had become. I had become everything that I detested in a human being. By the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd been married and divorced to 2 women 7 times. You have a lot of trouble with that, yeah.
Would you say that again?
Two of them 7 times.
That's probably a record. You reckon we ought to give him a hand for that?
Oh, no. But I know during my first marriage, after all the trouble I would have, and from time to time I'd come home drunk and all my stuff would be laying out in the yard. You all know what I mean when it's laying out in the yard, or some of you do. And they'd go out and divorce me and file for the divorce and put a restraining order on me and make off with the money and tell me not to ever come back, and I'd be very upset about that. But anyhow, I remember one time I kind of threw a little sober spell trying to get back in, and I promised my wife at that time that I would go to church with her. And I went to church, and I went to this preacher and and told him we were having lots of trouble, which was no news, wasn't any news to him. He knew about it. And I said, "I'd like to have a discussion with you and see if you can help me." And I was serious. I wouldn't have done this if I hadn't been serious. So I went to his study, and he set me down across the table from him, and he looked me right in the eye, and he said, "Well, Joe, what's your problem?" Well, if I'd have known what the problem was, I'd have told him. I was serious. I wasn't there fooling around. So I told him what I thought the problem was. It was her. And if you lived with her like I did, you'd drink too, I said. Well, he gave me a prescription, as they will do. And he said, "You must," and he emphasized that word, "you must have faith in these things and do these things." And he laid them out to me. Now, we have Southern Baptists in the South, and you have Northern Baptists up here. But we got Southern Baptists. It's a different story. And he said, "You must have faith in these things." And I couldn't have faith in those things. You know why? Because I didn't even believe them. So how can you have faith in something that you don't believe? So I went on about my business getting drunk. Thank God for the second step where it said that we could come to believe. See, I didn't know you could do that. Well, later on, after some more trouble, I got married to another woman. And this time I was looking for a woman that drank. Women that don't drink were mean and ugly. So I looked all over the bars, and I finally found my present wife. Her name is Phyllis. And we were introduced to each other. And she looked at me and she said, "Joe, you look like my 3rd husband." I said, "My God, how many have you had?" And she said, 2. Yeah. Well, I like that right away, Well, it wasn't long till we started having trouble. And it wasn't long till I started coming home and all my stuff would be laying out in the yard. And she started divorcing me, putting restraining orders on me, taking my money and putting me out of the house and telling me never to come back. And this time I went to a psychiatrist because I couldn't work the preacher's deal. So I went to the psychiatrist and I paid him $75 an hour. He sat me down across the table from him and he said, "Now, Joe, what's your problem?" Well, if I'd have known what the problem was, I'd have told him. Wouldn't you? $75 an hour? So I told him what I thought the problem was, and it was her and her. And if you live with those two, I said, you drink too. Well, he gave me a prescription too. He gave me a prescription for Valium. He thought I had a Valium deficiency. Now, he didn't mention not drinking and taking Valium. So I started taking Valium and drinking. Now, what happened to me then was that I got my wives and other women mixed up. I didn't know the difference between the bar and the job. And I just got messed up all the way around, just had all kinds of problems. So the time I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had become everything that I detested in a human being. Now, I laugh and joke about these divorces, but if you all know this been through them, they weren't no fun, So when I come here, I was standing in the back of the room looking down at my feet, ashamed, totally ashamed of what I had become. Had no idea that I was a very sick person until I got into the doctor's opinion and began to look at the illness of alcoholism and began to understand the illness of alcoholism. Now, in this book, the first printings of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the doctor's opinion was on page 1. In the second edition of the book, they moved it from page 1 into the Roman numeral sections. And people quit reading the doctor's opinion. Now, we don't read Roman numeral sections, do we? But I don't know why they moved that, and we can't find anyone to tell us why they moved it. But you see, the doctor's opinion is such great information and such wonderful information. He is going to describe the condition of the mind and the body that the rest of the book is going to tell us how to recover from. And if I don't have that knowledge, how can I recover from the condition of the mind and the body? See, I needed that information in the doctor's opinion, and that turned my life around. Unfortunately for me, it was to be 2 to 3 years in Alcoholics Anonymous before I found out that information. And during those 2 to 3 years, from time to time, I would get such a sick feeling within me. I would just be depressed, just down, down, down. And it would drive me to my bed. I'd have to go home and just go to bed. You see, I thought I was a no-good, rotten SOB trying to get good in Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't until I found out I was a very sick person trying to get well in Alcoholics Anonymous that I began to get well. And I did not know that. And the doctor's opinion explains that in great detail. And thank God for the doctor's opinion. Just like he did for Bill, he's going to do for us now.
Sometimes I wonder if we alcoholics in AA today know how lucky we really are. You know, alcoholism has been with humankind as far back as anybody can remember. All the way back through recorded history, we've always found references to the one who drank too much, to the alcoholic, to the inebriate, to the dipsomaniac, to the various different names that they called us. And this century is the first time in the history of humankind that we figured out what alcoholism is. Up until this century, nobody ever understood it. And because of the fact that nobody ever understood it, they could never find a solution to it. And since they couldn't find a solution, they never could determine the proper program of action. And misunderstanding alcoholism, they tried all kinds of different solutions and all kinds of different programs of action. And none of them ever really worked until this century. And I think we're the luckiest people in the world today to be able to be alive in a century when they've discovered what our problem really is, and also been able to give us a solution and a program of action. And one of the oldest recordings of history that we have in use today is the Bible. And you can go into the Bible and you'll find many, many different references to alcoholism. One thing I always kind of like to read from the Bible to show how long it's been with us was written by a fellow named Solomon. And Solomon was credited with writing Proverbs. And as you know, Solomon was a very wise man. And nearly all the people that had problems at that time, they would bring them to Solomon to solve them. And usually he could give them some kind of answer that they could act upon and solve their problems. But when it came to alcoholism, Solomon was just as baffled as anybody else was by it. Let me read you what he says in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 29 through 35. He said, "Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who has babbling? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine." In those days, everybody was a wino. They didn't have the hard stuff we got today. He said, "Look not upon the wine when it's red, when it gives its color in the cup, and when it moves itself aright." He said, "Because at last it will biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder." And he surely knew some of us fellows. He said, "Thine eyes shall behold strange women." Alcoholics really haven't changed all that much, have they? "And thine heart shall utter perverse things."
Like, trust me, honey.
And he said, Yea, thou shalt be as one that lieth down in the midst of the sea. Remember how you used to go to bed at night, 2/3 drunk, and that old bed start moving around on you? Or one that sleepeth at the top of a tall mast. You know how the mast on a ship will sway back and forth? He said, They will say, They have beaten me, and I felt it not. And how you used to get up in the morning, you got bruises all over you, you don't know where they came from. But then he made the most profound statement of all. He said, But when they awake, they shall seek it yet again. Almost a perfect description of alcoholism as we know it today. So alcoholism is not new. What's new is we found an answer for it. And the answer we found was based upon a little doctor in New York City telling us what alcoholism really is. A fellow named Dr. Silkworth. And Dr. Silkworth went to work in the town's hospital in 1930. And he didn't necessarily go to work in the town's hospital in 1930 because he wanted to work with drunks. Most doctors don't go to medical school to learn how to work with drunks. Most doctors don't like to work with us. You know, they say we'll never tell them the truth. And that's certainly the truth if there ever was one. And they said we never do what they tell us to do, and that's certainly right. But to say the real reason they don't like to work with us is we won't pay our bills either. That's most certainly right. Silky had lost the money that he had during the great crash of 1929 in the stock market. And he didn't have a job, and he needed a job. And a guy named Charlie Towns had started a little drying out center in New York City, named it the Towns Hospital after his own name. And he hired Dr. Silkworth to come there and work with alcoholics, basically to withdraw them from alcohol. And he paid him $40 a week, room and board. Now, while Dr. Silkworth was there, he began to get very, very interested in we alcoholics. He began to discern some different things in alcoholics than he had ever been able to see in ordinary people. He began to see people like us coming into that hospital, and we'd be in bad shape physically, bad shape mentally, you know, the kind of conditions we get in. And he would bring us in there and withdraw us from alcohol to avoid the convulsions and the DTs. And then he would start trying to build our bodies back up through the proper food, the proper rest, and etc. And he'd see us maybe 30 days, 6 months or so later. We would leave that hospital in good shape, both physically and mentally. The next time he'd see us, it'd be maybe 6 months later or 9 months later or a year later or even less. And we would be coming right back in that hospital in the same kind of shape that we were in when he had worked with us before. And he saw this happen to us over and over and over and over, and many of us beginning to die from the alcoholism. And he began to say, I believe there's something different about the alcoholic when it comes to alcohol than for the normal person. He began to say, it looks to me like when an alcoholic puts any alcohol in his system, whatever, there seems to be a physical craving develop that is so powerful that it overcomes the ability of the alcoholic to control the amount he's going to drink after he has once started. And he said, I don't see this happening to normal people. And he said, therefore, I'm going to make a statement. He said, I'm going to say, in my opinion, that the alcoholic's body has become allergic to alcohol. It reacts differently in the alcoholic's body than it does in the normal person. And he said, another thing I've noticed about them too, that after they leave here in good shape and in good mental condition, swearing they'll never take another drink as long as they live, fully, completely meaning that, within a relatively short period of time, their mind begins to play tricks on them. And it begins to tell them that maybe that last drunk wasn't quite that bad. Or maybe now that we haven't had a drink in 6 months, we could get by with 1 or 2. Or maybe since we've been sober for a year, we owe ourselves a drink or 2. And he said our mind will lead us back to believing that it's okay to drink. And he said just before the alcoholic drinks, the mind sees nothing wrong with taking a drink. and really believes it's going to be okay. And he said, we like to call this a mental obsession. An obsession of the mind being an idea that overcomes all ideas to the contrary. And he said that obsession is so strong in the mind of an alcoholic that left on their own resources, their mind will always tell them it's okay to drink. They'll take a drink, and then that will trigger the allergy, and then they'll be unable to stop drinking. And he said they have become absolutely powerless over alcohol. Powerless to safely drink it, and powerless to keep from drinking it. Now, we don't know whether Bill Wilson's the first one he told that to or not. Maybe Bill's the first one that acted upon it. But we do know when Bill went in that Towns Hospital in 1933, after he was withdrawn from alcohol, Dr. Silkworth sat down and explained this to Bill. And Bill left there for the first time knowing what his problem was. But as we said before, that didn't keep him sober. He started drinking again, went back in the summer of 1934. Dr. Silkworth had pronounced him incurable. He left there again, started drinking on Armistice Day 1934, and that's when Ebbie came to visit with him. So Bill, knowing the problem, didn't solve it, but it was necessary for Bill to know the problem before the other things could make any sense to him. And after Bill sobered up, and after Bill took this to Dr. Bob, and after they took it to Bill Dotson, and then after they took it to approximately 40 people, they said, hey, this guy might be right. This information may be correct. And they went to the doctor and asked him if they could use this information in this book that they were going to write. And he said, yeah, I'll let you use it under two conditions. Number one is you call it the doctor's opinion. He said, I don't have any proof of this. There's no way I can scientifically prove it. And he said, we doctors don't have any business stating facts unless we can prove them. So just call it the doctor's opinion. He said, the other condition is that you don't use my name. Because he said, if the other members of the medical profession find out I've said this and you put it in print, they'll drum me right out of the medical profession. And sure enough, after it was printed, the American Medical Association wrote a book review on it and said it was a bunch of charlatans, alcoholic in nature, who had found some quack doctor to agree with them, and this book would have no lasting value whatsoever, period. Now, in 1955 and 56, after 150,000 alcoholics had recovered from the condition Dr. Silkworth describes in the big book, the American Medical Association said, we believe it's a disease. But they didn't say it in the beginning, and Silky was smart. And I don't think it's by coincidence with the second printing or second edition of the big book, which came out in 1955, they put Dr. Silkworth's name in the book. He probably said, well, you can use it now. It'll be okay. We can get by with it, you know. So if we're to recover from this condition, let's look for just a few minutes at this thing. Let's see what the doctor had to say about it. Starting out on Roman numeral 24, first paragraph.
That's XXIV. I didn't know that for a long time. So the physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe. Now, to say there's no must in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, there's no must in the fellowship, but there's a lot of must in this book. There's one of them. We must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind.
Now, this is the first time we can find anywhere in written history a statement to the effect that the body is affected as well as the mind. Everything up to now had talked about the mind, weak will, moral character, sin, etc. But here we see a statement that brings in the body. And he said the body is quite as abnormal as the mind. And I think we need to realize there's two things being said here. That the body is affected as well as the mind, but also the mind and body both are abnormal. And when it comes to alcohol, we react to it abnormally physically, but we're also going to find we react to it abnormally mentally too. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the abnormality of the body.
So it did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we're in full flight from reality, or we're outright mental defectives. Now, these things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. But we're sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we could not otherwise account.
Now, if the purpose of a textbook is to transfer information from the mind of one human being to another, increasing the knowledge of the user of the book, and I think that's what they're for, then it stands to reason that transference of information will be based upon the understanding of the words that are used. If the writer of the book uses a word and has a certain understanding of it, the reader of the book reads that word and has a different understanding, then the information that comes through is going to be garbled and incomplete information. And there seems to be a few key words in the big book which have given many of us difficulty over a period of years. And maybe the first one is this word allergy. You know, most of us, before we come to AA, we already have a conception in our mind of what an allergy is. I know that I did. And I knew that if you were allergic to something, and you got around it, ate it, drank it, or whatever, there would be some physical manifestation of that allergy that you could see. For instance, if you're allergic to strawberries and you eat them, you'll break out in a rash, the rash being the physical manifestation or indicator of that allergy. If you're allergic to milk and you drink it, you'll have a bad case of dysentery. The dysentery being the physical manifestation of that allergy. If you're allergic to certain plants, such as ragweeds, you get around them, your eyes itch, your nose itch, they begin to water and you start sneezing. The itchy, watery eyes, the sneezing are the physical manifestation of that allergy. And I knew there had to be some physical manifestation you could see. Now, I come to AA and they said to me, Charlie, you're allergic to alcohol and you'll never be able to drink it again. And I said, how in the hell can I be allergic to alcohol? Now, I'm drinking a quart a day. How can you possibly drink that much of something you're allergic to? And I said, besides that, when I drink alcohol, I don't break out in a rash. And I don't always have a bad case of dysentery. Once in a while I would, depending on what I'd been drinking, but usually I didn't. Nor did it make my eyes, nose, itch, water, cause me to sneeze. And I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. I said, you need to explain that to me. And they said, well, you don't need to understand. They said, all you need to know is you just can't drink it anymore. Well, today I think I know why they told me that. I don't think they understood it a bit better than I understood it. And I went from that person to the next person to the next person to the next person, always trying to get somebody to explain to me what this allergy is. And invariably they said, don't worry about it. You don't need to know about it. Just keep coming to meetings. Don't drink. You'll be okay. Now, if you've got a keen intellectual alcoholic mind like I have, and you get a question like that dangling out here in front of you, if you don't find an answer to it, sooner or later it's going to run you completely out of your mind. And one day, in absolute desperation, I went to a source of information that's never failed me since that time. I went to a dictionary. And I looked up the word allergy. And I found several definitions for it, as you do with any word, depending on how you use it. But I found the one that I think fits me exactly. It says an allergy is an abnormal reaction to any food, beverage, or substance of any kind. An abnormal reaction. So I began to try to look back through my drinking life to see where I was abnormal when it comes to alcohol. And to my amazement, I realized that I don't know what's normal and what's abnormal. The only thing I know about drinking is the way I drink. And the way those people drink who drink with me, and if they don't drink like I do, we don't drink together. So in order for me to find out what's normal, I have to go to the normal, social, temperate, moderate drinkers. And I ask them to describe to me how they feel whenever they take a drink. And invariably it's something like this. Well, we can go home from work tired, tense, and wrought up from the day's work. We can have a drink or two before dinner. We'll get a kind of a comfortable, relaxing feeling. And we'll go ahead and have dinner. And then we probably won't drink anymore that evening. Well, now I don't feel that way when I drink alcohol. I take a drink of alcohol and I put it to my lips, and as it crosses my lips begin to tingle. Hits my teeth and they kind of chatter up and down. strikes my tongue, and I can feel my tongue begin to grow and expand and swell. Hits my cheeks, and they flutter in and out. And I can feel it passing up through my sinus cavities into my forehead, and I begin to get a feeling in my forehead which is absolutely indescribably wonderful. Now, I haven't even swallowed the damn stuff yet. I've just got it in my mouth. When I swallow that alcohol and it goes down through my esophagus, great things take place. The first thing happens is my chest begins to grow and expand and get bigger and bigger. Hits my stomach and literally explodes like a bomb. I can feel it immediately racing through my arms, and they're getting longer and longer. It hits my hands and fingers, and they begin to tingle and vibrate. At the same time, it's racing through my arms, it's racing through my legs. They're getting longer and longer. I'm getting taller and taller, and it hits my feet and toes, and they get a hot, intense, burning, exciting, get up and go somewhere and do something feeling. I don't understand a warm, comfortable, relaxing feeling whenever you have a drink. Now, upon a little further talking to these normal, social, temperate drinkers, I found out some information that absolutely amazed me. Invariably, every one of them said to me, we can have a couple of drinks, and we begin to get a slightly tipsy, out-of-control feeling. And they said, we don't like that feeling. Therefore, one or two drinks is all we want to drink. Well, today I realize that's the normal reaction to alcohol. Alcohol is a sedative drug to the normal person. You put it in the system and immediately goes to the brain. It sedates the brain, and it gives you a slightly tipsy, out-of-control feeling if you're a normal drinker. But when that alcohol goes into my body and hits my brain, it doesn't act as a sedative. For me, it acts as an upper. And instead of my brain getting a slightly tipsy, out-of-control feeling, my brain gets a very exciting, in-control feeling. They want to go to bed, and by God, I want to go to town. An entirely different mental reaction to alcohol. That's one way I'm different. Now, here's the other thing that absolutely amazed me. They say to me after we've had 2 or 3 drinks, not only do we get the slightly tipsy, out-of-control feeling in our mind, but they say we begin to get a feeling of nausea. And they say we don't like that feeling. Therefore, 1 or 2 drinks is all we want to drink. And how many times have you and I tried to get them to drink more than that? They'll say, oh, no, I feel this already. Or they'll say, no, this is making me dizzy. Or they'll say, no, I'm getting sick. I don't want any more. That's the normal reaction to alcohol. Alcohol is a toxic substance. It's a destroyer of human tissue. And normally when you put something in the body that'll destroy it, the mind and body recognizes it, reacts with nausea, and said, puke it up before it kills you. My body doesn't react that way at all. When I put alcohol into my system, instead of my body reacting with nausea, my body reacts with an actual physical craving that says, give me some more. Theirs says, puke it up. Mine said, put some more in. And that physical craving is so strong that after I've once started, I can't stop. So I react abnormally to alcohol in 2 ways. First, mentally, and second, physically. And therefore, since I'm abnormal in my reaction to alcohol, then according to the dictionary, I am allergic when it comes to alcohol. An abnormal reaction, and you can't see it. You can see the reaction to strawberries, that's a rash. You can see the reaction to milk, that's dysentery. You can see the reaction to ragweeds, that's itchy, watery eyes. But you can't see the reaction to alcohol, you can only feel it. And only alcoholics feel it. Normal, social, temperate, moderate drinkers never feel the physical craving that develops in our body after we've had a couple of drinks. So our physical reaction is there all right, but you cannot see it, you can only feel it, and only alcoholics feel it. Let's carry on with this just a little forward. Let's go over to Roman number 26, first paragraph.
It says, we believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics, they used to call me a chronic alcoholic. I used to hate that word. Chronic means today, I found out, it means just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I guess I was chronic alcoholic. Is a manifestation of analogy. That the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. Now, these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. See, I needed to know that information. I needed to know about the action of alcohol. When I start to drink, I want to crave more, because that explains many things to me that I couldn't otherwise account for, just like the book said. It explains to me, for instance, why I would start drinking with every intention of going home. And the next thing I know, I'd end up in Houston, Texas. See, when I drink, I go places. I mean, that's what I did. And I stayed gone a long time. And I drank a lot. That's just the way it was. Then I'd have to come home and explain where I've been. I couldn't explain where I've been because I didn't know where I'd been. But that explains many things for me which I couldn't otherwise account. Many, many, many times I went by the bar with every intention of having 2 or 3 drinks, and the next thing I know, it's midnight or 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning the next day, the next week, or the next month, and I haven't got home. And I couldn't explain that, why I would do such a thing, do those things. I thought I was a no good, rotten SOB. I didn't know that I had a physical allergy to alcohol, and once I start to drink, it's virtually impossible for me to stop. It explains many things which I couldn't otherwise account for. I remember one time I was on a plane going, and this is sober, I was doing some research for some of you guys. I was on a plane going from Tulsa to Dallas, and there was a really good-looking lady right across the aisle from me. She was about 29 years old, about my age. And she was just talking like a magpie, and she was going to Las Vegas for her first time. She wanted to know if I was going to Las Vegas for them. I wasn't going, but I wished I was going, but I wasn't. She was going to stay at the Flamingo Hotel. She was going to have a wonderful time, and everything was just wonderful. And I was watching her fiddle with that little old bottle of whiskey that she'd bought. She was carefully pouring it out into that drink, just being very, very, poured about half of it out. And I was staring at her intently. And she caught me staring at that bottle, and she said, "Would you like some of this?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I've got to be home by Christmas." That's what alcohol does to me.
Now, the action of strawberries to one who's allergic to strawberries is manifested by a rash. The action of milk on one who's allergic to milk is manifested by dysentery. The action of ragweeds on one who's allergic to ragweeds is manifested by itchy, watery eyes. Now, the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is the manifestation of the allergy. And that action is referred to here as the phenomenon of craving. He uses the word phenomenon because he doesn't understand why it happened. So he calls it the phenomenon of craving. And it's an actual physical craving that develops in the body. And you can't see it, you can only feel it. So if anybody asks you what is our manifestation of our allergy to alcohol, it is simply the phenomenon of craving. Now, the word craving has got to be looked at very carefully. Because in the context of the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, anytime you see the word craving, it is referring to the body. That's the manifestation of our allergy. I hear people say, "I came to AA and I craved a drink for 4 years." Now, in the context of the big book, that's the wrong use of the word craving. They may have wanted a drink, desired a drink, had a compulsion to drink. But the only way we alcoholics can crave alcohol is to put it in the system. Then the craving develops, and then we can't stop. That's the manifestation of our allergy. Now, we're going to look at 5 people real fast who have this thing, and we're going to drive that point home one more time. And a textbook always does this. It repeats itself over and over, driving the point home until finally we really begin to see it. Let's go to Roman numeral 28, and let's look at 5 different kinds of alcoholics.
So the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. It says there are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable, so we're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagons for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision.
We call that type 1.
There is a type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment.
Type 2.
There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger.
Type 3.
There is a manic-depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written.
Type 4. Now, I always thought I was the next one, a type 5.
Then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They're often able, intelligent, friendly people.
Yeah.
And that pretty well describes Charlie, doesn't it?
Now then, he drives his point home. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we've suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Now think what he said is this. That if all we alcoholics in this room tonight should take a drink, God forbid that happens, but if we did, we would not all react exactly the same. In just a few minutes, one of us would be crying in our beer. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo, the world not treating me right. Just a few minutes, one of us would be up on a table hooping and hollering and dancing and cutting up and having a hell of a good time. Just a few minutes, look over in the far corner, there'll be two of us over there getting in a fight, as sure as anything. Just a few minutes, look in this corner, there'll be two of us over there, one putting the bake on the other. We tend to do that also when we drink. We would do many different things. But if we're real alcoholics, there's one thing every one of us would do. We would start looking for a second drink. The phenomenon of craving is developed. The allergy's taken over. Now then we can't stop. We've got to have a third drink and a fourth drink and a fifth drink and a sixth drink and on till we're drunk, sick, and in all kinds of trouble. And it doesn't make any difference whether we're born with it or whether we drink ourselves into it. The thing that is important is that's the way we are tonight. And the reason I know that's the way we are tonight, if we were not that way tonight, we wouldn't be in this room tonight. If you and I could drink without getting drunk, you know where we'd be? I'd be in somebody's bar somewhere drinking without getting drunk. But you see, we can't do that. That's what's important in AA. That's the one thing we have in common. Doesn't make any difference how old we are, how young we are, male, female, whether we've been married 7 times or twice. None of that makes any difference. The thing that's important is what happens to you and I whenever we take a drink. It develops the phenomenon of craving. We can't stop, and we end up in trouble with it invariably. That's what we have in common in AA. Now, in the 1930s, this was Dr. Silkworth's opinion, but since then, it has been proven. In the 1930s, they knew very little about metabolism. Today, they know what happens. You take a piece of beefsteak, put it in your body, and your mind and body recognize it. Certain organs of the body produce enzymes. The enzymes attack the beefsteak. They break it down, they separate it into usable and non-usable items. The body will retain the amino acids, the vitamins, the carbohydrates, the proteins it can use. What it cannot use, it will dissipate through the urinary and intestinal tract. The body will do that with anything that you put in it, providing it's not a deadly poison or something that kills you before that happens. It'll do it with a liquid, the same as it'll do it with a solid. Now we want to spend just a couple minutes looking at a little picture which pretty well proves the doctor's opinion. Let us be the first to say this is not AA information. AA does not get involved into why we're allergic, because if we do, that would surely create some controversy amongst us. But this information has such depth and such interest that I think we would be remiss if we didn't look at it. In the center of that little picture, we have the 9 people who drink safely. They are at ease with alcohol. That's the normal, social, temperate, moderate drinker. They put a drink in the system. Mind and body recognizes it. Enzyme production starts. The enzymes attack the alcohol, break it down to acetaldehyde. Then after a period of time, it's diacetic acid. Then it's broken down to acetone. And in the final stage, it becomes a simple carbohydrate made up of water, sugar, and carbon dioxide. The water will be dissipated through the urinary and intestinal tract. The sugar is energy, calories. The body will burn it, store the excess as fat to be used at a later date. The carbon dioxide will be dissipated through the lungs. In the normal social drinker, this takes place at approximately 1 ounce per hour. Now, I know that varies with different people, but the average rate of metabolism for the normal drinker. If they don't drink over 1 ounce per hour, they can't get drunk. Their body recognizes it, burns it up, gets rid of it, dissipates it at that rate. And they hardly ever drink more than that. Remember, they get a slightly tipsy, out of control feeling. They don't like that. They also get a feeling of nausea. And if you're with one of them and they're drinking more than an ounce per hour, you better get out of the way. They're probably going to puke on you after a while. Let's take the one in the left-hand column. The one who does not drink safely or is at dis-ease with alcohol. We put a drink in our system, the same thing happens. The enzymes attack it, break it down to acetaldehyde, then to diacetic acid, then to acetone. But it seems as though in our body, the enzymes necessary to break it down from acetone to the simple carbohydrate are not there in the same quantities and or qualities as they are in the body of the non-alcoholic. It stays in our body for a much longer period of time as acetone. Now, it's been proven today that acetone ingested into the human system that remains there for an appreciable period of time produces an actual physical craving for more of the same. In the non-alcoholic's body, it goes through that stage so rapidly the craving never occurs. In our body, it stays there long enough, the physical craving develops, and then the physical craving demands a second drink. Now we take a second drink. We've got most of the acetone from the first, now we put in the acetone from the second. The acetone level goes up. The craving becomes harder. That demands a third drink. We put in the third. We got most of the first, nearly all the second. Now we put it in from the third. The acetone level goes up. The craving be hard, and that demands a fourth drink. Now at midnight, we're laying out in the parking lot. They run over us and broke our leg, and they come running up to us and say, "Can we help you?" And we say, "My God, yes, give me another drink." You see, we're craving it harder at midnight after 20 drinks than we were at 6 in the evening after 4 drinks. We never get enough. This explains those things to me. Now, if that situation never got any worse, I could probably learn to live with that. But we know not only do we have an illness, we have a progressive illness that always gets worse, never better. Probably for 2 reasons. Number one, acetone is a destroyer of human tissue. The more we drink, the longer we drink, the more tissue we destroy. And it seems as though the first organs of the body that are attacked by this stuff happen to be the liver and the pancreas. Today they know that the organs of the body that produce the enzymes necessary to metabolize alcohol are the liver and the pancreas. And as we damage them and begin to destroy them, the enzyme production becomes less and less, the craving becomes harder and harder, and the drinking becomes harder and harder, and the resultant trouble becomes more and more. We also know as we get older, the body begins to shut down on the production of everything. I wish that were not true, but believe me, it is. I'm beginning to experience some of that. If I'd take a drink today, at 20-some-odd years sobriety, I wouldn't start where I left off 20-some-odd years ago. The craving would be harder, the drinking would be harder, the trouble would be harder, due to the progressiveness of the aging factor. The enzyme production has become less and less and less as I get older, even though I'm not drinking. Now this explains to me why I can't safely drink. This explains to me why I used to stop in the bar to have 2 drinks and end up a week later before I got home. This explains to me why I've never been able to safely drink alcohol. Now I don't know about you guys, but the first drink I took was at age 14. The last drink I took was at age 40. And in 26 years of drinking, I don't ever remember taking 1 drink of anything that had alcohol in it. 1 always led to 2 to 3 to 6 to 8 to 10. I'm sure some of you drank with safety for several years. But somewhere you crossed the line and the same thing began to happen to you that happened to me from the beginning. But what difference does it make? That's the way we are tonight. Finally, I understand this thing. Now, the fact that I'm allergic to alcohol and the fact that I understand it is vitally important for me to know. But you know, if I never took a drink of alcohol, this couldn't happen to me. If I was allergic to strawberries and I went to the doctor would say, "I believe you're allergic to strawberries, and I think you ought to leave them alone." He couldn't give me any medicine to cure that. If I go to a doctor today with my allergy to alcohol, he'll say, "I believe you ought to leave that stuff alone." He can't give me any medicine to cure that. Now, what happens to me after I take a drink couldn't happen to me if I didn't take the first drink. All action is born in thought.
Say that again.
All action is born in thought. Sometimes we really think we do it automatically. No, we don't. I can't even pick up this cup unless my mind tells my body to do so. I can't take a drink of whiskey unless my mind tells me to do so. So the things that happen to me because of my allergy when I'm drinking couldn't happen to me if my mind didn't tell me it's okay to drink in the first place. So we're going to find as we progress through the book that even though this allergy is important, that's not our real problem. Our real problem centers in the mind telling us we can drink rather than in the body, which ensures that we can't. I have a friend who is allergic to all things fish. Every time he eats fish, his throat swells up and he has to go to the hospital. Now, the fact that he's allergic to the fish, though, is beside the point. If he never ate fish, that couldn't happen to him. But he's got something wrong in his head when it comes to fish. Because from time to time, his mind tells him it's okay to eat fish. And he'll eat the fish, and then the allergy takes over. And I bet it nearly always starts like this. Well, I haven't had any fish in 90 days. If I'd eat nothing but northern pike and lay off those sea bass, I'd be all right. Or it might say it's them damn people I've been eating fish with if I'd just change my... Whatever the reason, his mind gives him permission. I'm the same way when it comes to alcohol. There's something in my head that isn't right when it comes to alcohol. There's a light bulb that doesn't go on, a switch that doesn't work. There's something up there that from time to time, left on my own resources, tells me it's okay to drink alcohol. Now, Dr. Silkworth knew us quite well. We're going to spend just 2 or 3 minutes looking at the other side of this thing, and then we'll be through for the night. Let's go back to page Roman numeral 26, last paragraph, and let's look at the mental side of this thing for just a moment.
See, the most dangerous part of the illness of alcoholism is not when we're drinking. The most dangerous part of the illness is when we're sober. And you know why it's the most dangerous? Because we're thinking about drinking. We have an obsession of the mind. That's the most dangerous part of the illness. We're obsessed with drinking or thinking about drinking. I was when I was not drinking. I remember one time I quit drinking 30 days, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. By the end of that 30 days, it felt like my head was in a vice and somebody was squeezing it out one day at a time. My neck got tight. I couldn't hardly move it around without squeaking. Boy, one day I went down by the liquor store and bought me a pint of whiskey and drank it before I got home, which is about 2 blocks. Before I got home, old neck loosened up, got to thinking again, thinking good again. I said, boy, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to quit drinking ever again. That hurts too bad. You see, that's the most dangerous part of the illness is when I'm not drinking because I'm thinking. And it says that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol.
And many alcoholics are highly offended when you say that. They say, no, that's not the reason I drank. They say the reason I drank is because I love the taste of alcohol. I wouldn't argue with them whether they do or not. I love the taste of cold beer, always have, all of my life, as far back as I can remember. I also love the taste of Cold Mountain spring water. I never did sit down and drink a case of Cold Mountain spring water. Alcohol does something for me that Cold Mountain spring water doesn't do. As a kid growing up, I was always on the outside of the crowd looking in. Always wanted to be a part of, knew I could not be. Always knew that whatever I said, whatever I did would be wrong. People would laugh and I would be embarrassed. And one night somebody gave me a drink of alcohol, and all of those feelings disappeared. And I was allowed to function as a normal teenager ought to be able to function. I love the effect produced by alcohol. Now, if it gave me a slightly tipsy out of control, or if it gave me a nauseous feeling, I probably wouldn't like that effect. But you see, it gives me an exciting, in-control feeling. It doesn't make me feel like it makes normal people feel.
Now, there are many, many effects with which we drink alcohol for. I drank the same reason that Charlie did, and a lot of you did. It allowed me to do some things that I couldn't otherwise do. You all know what I'm talking about. Later on, I began to drink because I felt a little guilt, shame, remorse because of the things I did while drinking. And so I had to drink to get over some of those things. And in the last years of my drinking, I drank for the sickest effect of all, and that was total oblivion. I just wanted out of it. There's only one thing wrong with oblivion. You wake up, don't you? Then you got to start doing it again, over and over and over, and that's what I did. It says the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they can, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. So when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know the true from the false anymore. See, to them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one, and my alcoholic life had become normal to me. Every place I went, drinking was involved. Everybody I ran around with, drinking was involved. They drank like I drank, or I didn't run around with them. I used to go to football games, and I thought I would have sworn when I was drinking back in those days that 60,000 people was drunk as I was. When I got sober and went to a football game, I found hardly anybody was ever drunk as I was at a football game. But I didn't know that. I didn't know the truth from the false. I remember my wife one morning woke up, and we come to, we drinking together. And I said, Phyllis, most people don't drink like we do. And you know what she said to me? Me? She said, bullshit. Now, I don't talk that way. That's what she said. She said, everybody we know drinks just like we do. And that's the truth. Everybody we knew drinks just the way we did. So our alcoholic life became normal to us. And they said to them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And this is what we are when we're not drinking. They are restless, irritable, and discontented. And we put a few more other little words in there too. We're full of guilt, shame, and remorse as a result of some of the things we did while drinking. And unless they can again experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. Impunity means seeing other people drink seemingly without any problem. And after they have succumbed to the desire again, and so many do, and they start drinking, and then the phenomenal craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. Now this is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope for his recovery. An entire change of attitude while not drinking, there's very little hope for his recovery. And this is exactly what we're talking about in Alcoholics Anonymous. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Charlie?
We're going to look at this picture up here for just a moment. Before we finish up, if Joe would go to that other screen, we'll try to kind of do a twofold thing here. We've drawn in here what we call an emotional barometer to kind of indicate the kind of conditions we get in whenever we're not drinking. All human beings have emotions. We're different than the animals. We have these emotions. The emotions build up in our minds. And as those emotions build up in our minds, they cause us to be restless and irritable and discontented. They cause us to be embarrassed. They cause us to have these feelings of not fitting in anywhere. And I used to think that we alcoholics growing up were the only people that had those feelings. But I recognize today that nearly all kids do that. Nearly all kids as they grow up, they have feelings of inadequacy. They have feelings of not fitting in. They have those feelings of restlessness, irritability. They have those feelings of fear, and etc. That seems to be just a part of human nature, and it's caused by our emotions. Now, most people, as they grow up, when they have emotional problems, they usually search for and find some kind of answer. And nearly always that answer will lie within a power of some kind greater than they are. If it wasn't a power greater than they were, then it wouldn't solve the emotional problem and wouldn't make them feel better. Some people seem to find the answer to their emotional problems in the very beginning from this thing called God, or God as we understand Him. And they put their dependence upon God, and they go through life in pretty good shape, and they very seldom get too far out of kilter. I used to see those people, and I always marveled at how they could go through life and feel good and not be scared to death and not always be getting in trouble, and I'd wonder, what have they got that I don't have? Some people, as they grow up and their emotions begin to build up, they'll reach a certain level, and they find that there's certain foods that they can eat. And they find that if they eat that food, then the emotions become down or go down and become less, and it makes them feel better. And immediately they find that the food that they eat becomes an answer to the problems that they have with their emotions. And after a while, they keep eating that same food over and over, and next thing you know, the food itself begins to be a problem and literally destroys them. Some people, as they grow up, they have these emotional problems, and they find their answer in gambling. And they find that whenever they gamble, all those emotional fears seem to disappear, and they really do feel good, and they find their solution in gambling. But after a while, gambling gets to be the problem, and they literally destroy themselves. Some people find the answer in hard work. and they find that they have emotional problems. They go out and start doing some work, and immediately they feel better. And working becomes the solution to their problem. And after a while, though, the work itself gets to be a problem. They literally destroy themselves. All people have emotional problems. All people find answers greater than themselves to solve them. Mine answer happened to be alcohol. One night at a high school dance, 14 years old, I was standing at the side of the old gymnasium watching the kids dance. And there's a girl out there I so desperately wanted to dance with named Betty. And at age 14, I just couldn't even get around you girls. You just absolutely scared me to death. I was tongue-tied when I got around you. And I wanted so badly to dance with Betty, but I couldn't ask her. And the guy gave me a drink of moonshine whiskey. And when he did, that great, exciting, in-control feeling came over me. I marched right up to Betty. I asked her to dance. I danced with her. I asked her to take her home. We got in the back seat of a 36 Chevrolet, and I got to do some things I'd been wanting to do for a hell of a long time. I loved what alcohol did for me. Now, the answer to my emotional problem immediately became a drink of alcohol. Now, up here in our minds, we got a thing called a memory bank. And when you got a problem and you find a solution, your memory bank records the solution. And it's a good thing if it's on the right thing. What it does when it records the solution, then the next time you have the problem, it feeds the solution right back to you. If it didn't, you'd have to go find the solution again. And the next time I got in one of those situations where I was embarrassed, didn't feel good, my emotions were building up, I got hold of a drink of booze, and immediately the magic happened the second time. And then every time I took a drink from that time on, the magic would happen over and over and over and over until finally my mind became mentally addicted to using alcohol as the solution to my emotional problems. Not physically, mentally addicted. Now, if I was not alcoholic, that would be okay. But you see, my problem is, left on my own resources, as my emotions begin to build up, after a while, they trigger the idea of taking a drink. And I begin to think about that great, exciting, in-control feeling. As Dr. Silkworth says, that great sense of ease and comfort. And I begin to concentrate on what one drink will do for me. And the idea of what one drink will do for me becomes so great, it pushes out all ideas to the contrary, and I can't remember the last drunk. I can't remember the jailhouse, the divorce court, the car wreck, the hospital. I'm simply thinking about what that drink will do for me. Now, based on what it will do for me, then I take a drink. And when I take a drink, then I come right over here and it triggers the allergy. And then I can't stop drinking. And I go through the well-known spree. And I emerge remorseful down here at the bottom of the sheet. Restless, irritable, and discontented. Filled with shame, fear, guilt, and remorse. Usually singing our national anthem, saying, I'll never do that again as long as I live. And I really mean I'm not going to do that anymore. But after a while, a day passes, or a week passes, or a month passes, and my emotions begin to build up. Now, it's not the big things of life. Usually what causes this emotional build-up is just having to get up every morning and go to work. Same damned old job. Crying kids. Burnt bacon. Bitchy boss, flat tire, all the things that all human beings have to learn to live with. And my emotions begin to build up and build up and build up. And they reach a point right here, and I begin to think about taking a drink, but then I say, no, I'm not going to take a drink. I know I'll get in trouble. But after a while, as the emotions continue to build up, finally, it triggers the idea to take a drink. I see nothing wrong with it. I take a drink. I trigger the allergy, and I can't stop drinking. And I end up drunk, and I emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to do that again, and I repeat that cycle over and over and over and over and over. The mind is now destroying the body, because the mind is causing me to take the first drink. Then as the drinking progresses, it gets worse and worse. The troubles become more and more. And after a while, the troubles are destroying the mind, feeding the idea to take a drink, and the mind is destroying the body, and the body is destroying the mind, and I'm caught in a vicious cycle I can't get out of. Now, after I'd been drinking about 20 years, I said to myself one day, Charlie, you're going to have to do something about your drinking. You just can't live this way any longer. Now, the thought never crossed my mind that I ought to quit drinking. What I said to myself is, you need to learn to control your drinking while drinking. Have 2 drinks and quit. Go to the liquor store and get a half a pint, and you can't get drunk on half a pint, and by that time the liquor store will be closed. How many of you tried to control your drinking while drinking? Well, you see, today I know why I can't do that. Because of the physical allergy, but I didn't know that after 20 years of drinking. So the last 6 years of my drinking was basically trying to control my drinking while drinking. And finally, after about 25 years of drinking, we'll say, my mind said to me one day, said, Charlie, I don't believe you can drink at all. I'm a slow learner, but I finally learned it. And when you can't drink at all, then what do? Well, you trot out the most useful tool that an alcoholic has. And you put it right in there, and it's called willpower. And you say, Sickie, Will, we're through with that drinking. We'll never take another drink. Now we're sober. But remember, we're restless, irritable, and discontented. And we're filled with shame, fear, guilt, and remorse associated with that last drunk. And we don't feel good, and we'd love to feel better. And our mind begins to build up. These emotions start to build up. We get to be a mental basket case. We reach a point up here, it triggers the idea to drink. We say, no, sir, we're through with that drinking. By God, we've promised our wives and our boss and everybody around us we're not ever going to take another drink, and that day we don't drink. But we didn't do anything about the emotions. And they keep building up and triggering the idea to drink and triggering the idea to take a drink. We block about the willpower, and one time after 9 months of being sober, one of them little devils got through willpower, and my mind said, let's have a drink. And when my mind said, let's have a drink, I couldn't see anything wrong with drinking. All I could remember is the great sense of ease and comfort that's going to come at once by those first 2 drinks. And my mind said it's okay to drink, and I took a drink or 2, triggered the allergy, and I'm off and running again. So you see, it's easy today for me to see why I can't drink safely because of the allergy. It's easy for me to see today why I can't quit drinking because of the obsession. Now, if I can't drink because of the allergy and I can't quit because of the obsession, then I have become absolutely powerless over alcohol. Now, I don't care what a problem is. There must always be some way to attack a problem. And if you can just find a way to attack a problem, then you can solve it. Now, we know that there's nothing at all that can be done about the physical allergy. They have found no medicine yet that I can take that makes it safe for me to drink alcohol. So I can't solve it over there. The only way I can possibly solve it is here in the mind. If I could find a way to live, we're down here on the bottom, I'm not restless, irritable, and discontented. If I could find a way to live where down here on the bottom I'm not filled with shame, fear, guilt, and remorse, then maybe I could find a way to live where I could be sober and peaceful and happy and free. Maybe I could find a way to live where I could be sober and these emotions wouldn't build up in my mind to the point that it triggers the idea of taking a drink. The answer has to lie within here. And if we can get better in our emotions, then we don't have to take a drink in order to change the way we feel. And that is called recovery. It has nothing to do with being sober. That's called recovery. And of course, we all know how that comes about through the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today, I found a way to live where I still have emotional problems, but I don't have them to the extent that it triggers the idea of taking a drink. We'll always be human. We'll always have some emotional problems, but we can learn to live in a manner that those emotional problems don't trigger the idea to take a drink. Therefore, we have recovered from that hopeless condition known as alcoholism. Joe?
And the book says that, on the other hand, as strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, see, he's left the body and gone to the mind, talking about the psyche. Once this psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules, and the few simple rules are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's exactly what they're about, to help us to recover from the condition of the mind and the body that was just described for us in the doctor's opinion. Now I want to tell you a little story. It'll show you a little example about how strong the obsession of the mind is. Those of you who are alcoholics, do you all remember your very first drink or your very first drunk? Raise your hand if you do. Okay. Now, how many of you remember your very first ice cream cone? The point I'm trying to say is the obsession of mind has not gone anywhere. It's still there. It's always just there. It's uppermost in my mind. And I used to have an obsession to drink, and I stayed drunk. Now I have an obsession to stay sober, and I stay sober. I think about staying sober constantly and about Alcoholics Anonymous and the solution that we're going to talk about the rest of the weekend. I'm always involved in that solution in some manner so that I can stay sober, so that I don't have to go back to drinking.
Thank you all for being here tonight. We've enjoyed it. Hope you have.
9 o'clock. We'll be back here at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I imagine we better close with the Lord's Prayer, okay?